My dear friends, one more opportunity to be with you, to share information, to tell you about what I think about the health problems that really are around us. And it is a lot more important because what I'm going to tell you, what I always tell you about, is all the health issues that threaten our peace and well-being and everything, but so much more important because a lot of those circumstances are preventable. Or said in different words, we produce them with lifestyle, with our eating habits, with the things we do, things we put in our body, etc. So it just takes a little bit of consciousness and thinking to be aware of how much we're damaging our bodies and how much we can help our bodies to be healthy for many, many years. I am Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, and every week we produce a broadcast of this nature with the help of Truth Be Told Radio Network. And we broadcast this program every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Truth Be Told Radio Network. If you miss it, you have two options. Tune Saturday morning, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time again, or go to Spotify and search Truth Be Told Radio Network, and you're going to find countless hours of programs like this, where we're going to discuss and when we're going to talk and when we're going to share information that I think it can really change your life. It can really save a lot of money. It can save a lot of suffering and make everybody's lives easier. The cost of healthcare in the United States, I don't have to tell you, we all know, it's overwhelming. And there is no government, there is no tax, there is nothing that can overcome the health issues that we have if we don't do anything on our side. Because after all, it's not a matter of money. That is probably one of the problems that we have. That should be all, in big part, a problem in itself. That we think that if we spend more money in healthcare, we're going to be healthier. Well, think again. Let me give you a simple analogy. What do you think would be a nicer, cleaner, beautiful city? The one that uses a lot of money in cleaning and watering and fixing streets, or the one whose citizens take care of their front lawns, of their sidewalks, of their simply sweeping and keeping garbage out of the way, produce less garbage to begin with? Well, that, to me, it's going to be a lot simpler, nicer, and that's going to leave money to do something else. Instead of cleaning for everything that a lot of people do without any thoughtfulness, without any interest in everybody's well-being. Same happens with health. It is not a matter of how much money we spend on health. It is a matter of how much we, each one of us, as an individual, will help to prevent disease, to be healthier longer, to be able to enjoy wellness for more and more years. That's going to save so much money, so much money. And the other problem is that we grew up, it's not our fault, we were trained that way. They told us that you don't have to worry, you can have your cake and eat it too, you can have fun, you can, you deserve a lot of fun in your life and a lot of good times, etc. And that after all, if we ever get sick, we can go to the doctor and the doctor is going to write a prescription. Then you take that medication and everything is back to normal. It is not. Definitely it is not. And we're facing an epidemic of chronic degenerative diseases that every single day give us more victims, more expense, and more suffering. Let's touch on one of those conditions that epidemiologically and economically and suffering and everything is at the center of everything we're talking about. It is almost universal. The number of people that have problems in this area is growing. It's growing every day. Not only is growing in numbers, but continues to go down and down and down in the age of onset. Remember the days when we thought, oh, I don't want to grow old because I have seen my grandmother or I have seen my neighbor. When they grow old, oh, they have to go to the doctor, they have to do x-rays, they sometimes have to go to the hospital, they don't perform as well. They have problems walking, moving, they're always in pain, etc. So I don't want to grow old. We always associated becoming older with health issues. Not anymore. Think again. Because the problem that I'm going to talk about today, and you're going to immediately identify the circumstance as true, is a condition that gets its worse when you are in your 20s or 30s or 40s. That's a young person. That's a very young person. That's a person that's beginning a family. That's a person that's beginning a work. That's a person that's climbing up every ladder and being successful and happy. And all of a sudden he finds out that he has this problem. And the problem is colonic disease, inflammatory disease. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about inflammatory bowel disease. Doctors call it colitis. And then you can find a lot of last names to that colitis, depending on what exactly is causing it, what exactly, how it is exactly manifesting it, how complicated it is. But let me tell you, it's probably one of the most prevalent diseases in America today. If you take a look at the world, the statistics are going to tell us, and I hope you're sitting where you can watch a map. The higher you go in latitude, the more prevalent the disease is, which means you go from the equator, here, here, here. All of a sudden, you get across the border with Mexico. You're already in America. You keep going up, you keep going up, and then things start to get worse. You start seeing more and more people. Then the Far East doesn't have that many. But as you come eastward, it starts to increase. And the same on the other end. That puts Northern America and Northern Europe at the center of this, let's call it, epidemic. We have a lot of problems with colitis. We have inflammatory bowel disease all over. All you have to do is interview the person that's sitting next to you and say, do you have any problems with your tummy? Are you constipated? Do you have bouts of diarrhea every now and then? Are you achy? You have any pains, any feelings, any colics in your abdominal cavity? Are you very sensitive when you get your clothes on? Is there any sensitivity on your tummy? Do you have any problem with that? when you eat, do you get bloated? Do you start producing gases? Are you intolerant? That's a word that didn't exist only 50 years ago. Are you intolerant to gluten? Are you intolerant to lactose? Are you intolerant to certain foods that you cannot eat because they make you sick? Just ask around or ask yourself. And you're going to see how many people around you have this problem. And this is inflammatory bowel disease. And it involves mainly the large intestine, the colon, as we call it. And we have to explain you why. And I have to explain you what we're doing against our own physiology of the colon every day, and why we're getting sicker and sicker, and why our younger generations are the ones that have the problem. You don't see a 60, 70-year-old gluten intolerant. No, it's normally a 20, 30-year-old. A teenager. We're looking at more and more cases of teenagers and even younger with full allergies, quote unquote, with food intolerance, quote unquote, or with blatant problems of intolerance. They eat this, they get sick, and then we blame it on the food. Oh, he shouldn't eat milk because lactose is bad for him. No, he shouldn't eat wheat because gluten is bad for him. Think again. Do you have any idea for how many thousands of years mankind has been eating milk and wheat? Why today? Why after thousands of years of eating wheat and milk, all of a sudden we discover today that they're bad for you? It reminds me the idea that they got us on when we were in the 60s and 70s, that we shouldn't eat eggs, that we shouldn't eat butter, that we should eat these things. The same now. And lactose became an evil, wheat became an evil, and the real evil is what we do and how we are training our children. Don't go anywhere, because I have so many things to tell you about this. I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, and I'm talking with you with the help of Truth Be Told Radio Network. You can also get all these broadcasts not only like every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but you can listen to it on Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or search for Truth Be Told Radio Network in Spotify. You will find 150 plus programs like this. So you're going to be able to know a lot. We're also available in Facebook, in Twitch, and Twitter, and Instagram. So feel free to take a look. Feel free to, I would absolutely love if you follow us. If you read and listen, at least partially, of everything that we say, and also if you share it. Because believe it, this is information that can change completely your life, that can prevent a lot of very disgusting health problems, and save you a lot of money at the same time. So why not listen? Why don't get a little bit of advice? And if you have any question or any comment, you can go to the social media of your choice and ask a question. You can give me a call. You can ask not only a question, but a comment. You can tell me what, even if you disagree, I'll be very happy to talk with you and give you my points of view. Nobody has the full truth. But this is information that we gather from the medical literature, and for over 50 years as a physician that I have, and 40 years plus years of experience at the BioCare Hospital and Wellness Center. We have been working with these problems for so many years, and instead of looking at things getting better, I actually have some dismay because I see that this is a growing problem. We're talking today about inflammatory bowel disease, and this is a growing problem. We see it more and more. We have more individuals, and we have it in younger people. So it is something that tells me that we're in the process of creating the foundation for chronic inflammatory disease that in turn is going to be transferred to diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, you name it. If you think of all these diseases, all of them have a basis of chronic inflammation. And that chronic inflammation has been brought upon us by ourselves. You are responsible of the inflammatory level of your body. Because the lifestyle, because what you eat, because the lack of exercise, etc., we have transformed the way we live. You don't have to go too far. You can ask your mother, your grandmother, how did you live when you were a child? How did you live when you were an adolescent? What did you do day to day? I mean, television was just beginning. Television was a matter of few hours. I know television is not anymore fancy, but nevertheless, we spend a long, long time in front of a screen. It could be a computer, could be a tablet, could be your phone. Nevertheless, we spend countless hours in front of those screens doing physically nothing. Our bodies are sitting down, and on top of that, we have the problem with food and diet and what we do. So all this has been creating a problem. Inflammatory bowel disease can be divided into different categories. It can be tuberculosis, in other words, these small pockets that form in your colon that can get infected, that can they can even open up and let air and bowel content slide into the abdominal cavity. You're going to end up in the hospital. And they have to remove those things, and in many occasions they have to remove part of your bowel. And in some occasions they're going to remove part of your bowel and leave a colostomy, a bag on your side to collect your stool because your bowel is no longer capable of doing that until the inflammation goes down. And then you're going to go back to the surgical room to fix what they did. Does that make any sense? When we know you can 100% prevent it. Doctor, how can you say that I can prevent it? Because in societies of the world that have a different lifestyle, let's go to South America, let's go to Africa, let's go to those places where people eat a lot of raw fish, where people eat a lot of vegetables, where people eat small amounts of fat because they eat very little meat. And not only that, but they are physically active. They do a lot of things physically, as Americans did just at the turn of the 20th century. Americans chopped wood, rode on horses, walked long distances, did the laundry by hand, cleaned the houses by hand. So they did a lot of physical activity, and they ate what they had to eat. And they didn't overeat. This is something that we began doing probably in the last 50 years. Eating a lot more food than what we really need. And if you add that excess of food to lack of physical activity, you have what we have, an overweight, obese population. This is very dramatic because this inflammatory bowel disease can damage the bowel to the point that's going to change your life for the rest of your life. One of the problems that we have in our minds is the history that infectious diseases of the bowel, parasitic infections of the bowel, have been very common through the history of mankind. And many of those infections are self-limited. What does that mean? I get a bug, I feel bad, I have some diarrhea, even vomit, I get very sick, I feel terrible, and a few days later I start coming back. Why? Because my immune system controlled the infection, even without antibiotics, because we humans have been around long before antibiotics appeared, and we could go through it. And parasitic infections? Well, most of the cases, they don't even give a problem. Why? Because in most cases, parasites live in our body and they kind of make a pact of no aggression. They behave, we behave. So they have a place to live and we obtain certain advantages from them. So it's a good relationship in many cases. Nevertheless, if you want to get rid of parasite, it only takes one pill. It's very easy to get rid of it. So we became very, very nonchalant about what a bowel problem means, because we always think it's simple. Our brain tells us, no, this is simple. You go to the doctor, he gives you a pill, you're okay. And because of that, we do nothing. Or we learn to live with a symptom. You say, I cannot eat this because I get bloated. No, I cannot have lactose because I get sick. No, I cannot have... And just by avoiding certain foods, we live longer but not healthy. Until one day we have an acute pain, a terrible pain, we have to go to the emergency room and they tell you, you have diverticulitis. You know, a lot of the cases of diverticulitis are diagnosed only after a terrible experience. Something went very wrong. We didn't do anything before, even though we had symptoms. Had you gone to the doctor before, he would have told you, let's check it out. You might have diverticulitis. But we don't do anything because we don't even think of that. Again, we're nonchalant. It'll go away. But in many cases, it will not go away, and then you get this ulcerative colitis. Ulcerative colitis attacks children, because it attacks people in the second decade, third decade of their lives, teenagers, young adults. Yet they live day in, day out with a lot of bad feelings, fever-like, infectious-like symptoms, bloatedness, gas, and in many cases, because of the ulcers, they bleed. And again, they might end up in a hospital very frequently. It's not like 1 in a million. We have a lot of young people that end up in a hospital due to anemia or due to important bleeding of the bowel because of this infectious problem. What's happening in one case, in the other case, in the other case? I'm going to tell you very easy, very simple. And when you think of that, it will make it a lot easier to understand. What's happening is we are losing the integrity of the wall of the bowel. Let me tell you something. The bowel has an inner layer that keeps the bowel content in the bowel and the internal milieu internal. You don't mix. You don't mix your blood, you don't mix your lymphatic system with whatever is in the bowel. Thanks to that layer of mucosa that we're going to call the colonic mucosa. Very much like the skin. Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever thought that around here could be a lot of things? Dust, parasites, bugs, dirt, etc. And then you go and do this thing and do the other, then you rinse it and you're fine. Why? Because your skin kept everything out of your body. Well, we have two big surfaces. This one, which is the skin, and the inner contact of all the gastrointestinal content against the blood, against the body. The integrity of your skin and the integrity of that mucosa are very important, critical to our survival and well-being. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment. So please, stay with me. It's very important to understand it. The foundation of all chronic degenerative disease. We're talking about inflammatory bowel disease. And I'm telling you that if you ask anybody around you for symptoms, many people, no matter how old, how young they are, will tell you about different symptoms. Bloatedness, an achy tummy, bouts of diarrhea, gases, constipation. Constipation is so frequent, and people don't pay any attention to it. They say, oh no, I just go every 2-3 days. Sometimes I go a week before going. Why? Because they're eating no fiber. They have a very sad state of the intestinal flora. And I was telling you that the same way we have a barrier between the outside world and our internal self that's limited by the skin. And that skin is very important to keep us healthy. It's actually the largest organ of the body. It's an organ. It has cells, it has blood vessels, it reproduces itself, it can do a lot of things. It has immune capacity, and so forth. It has all sorts of nervous endings. That's why when you pinch, when you hurt, it hurts, because it sends messages. That's the way you know it's cold, it's hot, etc. So it's a very important organ. And probably the main function is the insulation of the body against the external world. But we have another internal world that we don't want to get in contact with our body. And that's the content of our gastrointestinal world. The problem becomes bigger when you get to the large bowel. Why? Because there you have stools, there you have a lot of bacteria, there's where you can have parasites, there is when you can have a lot of factors that you don't want to get into the blood. Actually, let me tell you something if you didn't know. Whatever is in the bowel cannot go readily across the bowel into the body. Oh no. They're very important, very strict checkpoints. The cells in the bowel look at whatever substance wants to get across, check it out, check everything and say, yes, you're welcome, come in. You are forbidden to get close. But like any border, it needs a lot of surveillance, it needs a lot of personnel, it needs a lot of cells that is going to keep everything out of the blood. And the other thing you need is you need a structure. Like in any border, you have fences, you have gates, you have cameras, you have systems that control the passage of individuals or merchandise across that border. Well, the bowel has all that. But what happens if the fences start to go down, if the gates get damaged, if people do not show to work, if you have holes here and there, well, there's a lot of individuals and things that are going to get across the border without any control. Is it very hard for me to tell you or to ask you, do you think that's good or do you think that's bad? Think of the answer. Is it good that all the defenses of the border go down, damaged, that people do not go to work so there's no officials to take a look and care? Is that good or bad? Of course it is bad. Because then the border is not a border anymore. That happens with colonic mucosa. The colonic mucosa is a group of cells and structures that live very much together. They're one against the other. There's not one molecule that can go through between me and my neighboring cell. No way. Why? Because we're there to check that everything that goes through can go through. So what we have to do here is to keep that structure and those cells very healthy. Now there's a little problem. The problem is that those cells are very far away from the blood. In other words, blood goes here, and then you have these villi that line up the bowel, and you have there the colonic cells. Now, the blood goes under, but the cells that are at the top do not have access to blood. Well, every cell has to eat, doesn't it? If you have one cell, it has to get food somewhere. If I cannot get it from the blood of the person I live in, where do I get it from? I'm going to get it from essential fatty acids produced within the bowel by bacteria when they metabolize the fiber we eat. In other words, the fiber we eat gets transformed into essential fatty acids, very small, that are eaten by the colonic cells. So they get nice and healthy and full of energy. But if we don't eat any fiber, if we eat bad food, if we eat bad fats, we eat garbage, in one word, what's going to happen? The cells of the colon are going to start lingering, getting weaker, getting less energetic, and some of them are going to start dying, and the villi are going to shorten and separate. And once they separate, the food contact of the bowel can go closer to the bloodstream. And then is when you have food intolerance. Because that content gets close to the blood, we shouldn't, and produces immune responses that make you feel sick. People have the same type of symptom that you get when you're going to get a flu. You get aches, pains, you feel a general discomfort that's very hard to pinpoint, but you just say, when I eat certain things, I don't feel good. And then I develop gas, and then my tummy aches. Why? Because there is an inflammatory reaction to that food going into the system without any checking. That food should be in the bowel, not in the bloodstream. But it's going because we're losing the structure, the health of the colonic cells. And that is due mainly because of the way we eat. What to me is a big problem? To me, a very big problem is that behind any person that doesn't know how and what to eat, there is a mother, a father, a grandfather, a caregiver that never understood that we have to educate our young ones to eat what they have to eat. Actually, I'm planning to make a broadcast about that. How are we feeding our children? Because I see it over and over again. The other day I was going on an airplane, and the steward came, and she asked a man, a young man, probably 30 years old, with two young girls, probably 3 years old, 2 years old. And the steward says, do you want anything to drink? And the man asked his daughters, what do you want to drink, honey? And the girl said, Diet Coke, a diet soda pop. And the father said, oh, that's what she wants. And the other girl said, me too. And he said, make it two. Is that a father? Is that a man that has the conscience that he's feeding a person that hopefully will become a very healthy adult? Or is just a person that wants to please somebody so that person doesn't bug me? That's the feeling I get very frequently. And we're going to talk about that. But right now, you have to understand that if we lose the structure, the integrity of the structure of the colon, and the amount of colonic cells on watch, we're going to begin having all these situations. I tell you, abnormal substances, they're not abnormal. They're normal in the colon, but shouldn't be in touch with the deeper parts of the colon. But they get deeper because the villi that should be stuck to each other start to separate because they become thinner, shorter, and with less cells. So the food starts permeating, and what the body does is gets an immune reaction. That's what you're feeling. When you feel achy, when you feel gassy, when you feel this, it is an immune reaction. And that immune reaction translates into swelling of the bowel. And if the loss of integrity continues, you have two problems. One, you get an ulcer, you get an opening. It's like with people with diabetes. If the blood flow to your leg is very, very bad, the skin is going to die and leave an open sore. Well, that's what you get in your bowel. You're going to have an open sore, which is an ulcer. And that might bleed. And when it bleeds, it's going to send you to a hospital. And they might have to remove part of your bowel because of that. And on the other hand, the other situation that we can see very frequently is that weakened part of the bowel, because of the bowel contact and the pressure, etc., produces a little balloon that goes outward. Same like when you have a very old hose. The pressure of the water creates these balloon-like type of things. And of course, that wall is weaker, is thinner, can be infected very easily, actually gets infected frequently, and then it can break. And then you go to the hospital, they're going to remove part of your bowel, and you're going to be never more the same person. Well, you have to go through that. when you have answers. So don't go anywhere. BioCare could be your answer. My dear friends, I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And today, like every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I broadcast through Truth Be Told Radio Network a message that hopefully will help you to have more information about how you can prevent disease, how can you be healthier, how can you have better well-being. Well-being is the basis of joy. We cannot have a joyful, happy life if we're sick, if we have a health issue. So it's important that we know that we should be healthful, but the most important thing in our message every week is the fact that that well-being, that health, is not just, doesn't occur by chance. It's the result of how we live. It's the result how we develop. It's the result of what we eat and how we move. It's the result of our spiritual well-being. There are many factors that contribute to our well-being, and we have to take care of that. Because if we don't understand it, we're going to go into one or a different problem. And in today's world, in America, every single statistic, every single health review tells me that the dominant health issue is chronic inflammatory degenerative disease. What is that? That's an illness that continues for weeks and months, that has a foundation of some inflammation anywhere in the body. And the problem is that inflammation means pain. So we're very surely going to have painful problems. And that brings degeneration of the tissue. What does that mean? It means that our cells become smaller, weaker, bad performing, so our whole body is going into a degenerative condition. And that disease, that group of diseases, are what produce, first and foremost, the number one killer: heart and vascular disease, strokes. That's what produces cancer, because chronic inflammation creates the conditions for cancer cells to develop and to progress. We all make cancer cells every now and then, but our immune system beats them. But when that system goes into degeneration, we cannot fight them off, so they will grow, they will progress. That's what gives us diabetes, through the lack of sensitivity to insulin, or to the failure of the pancreas to produce as the insulin we need, because it has also been assaulted by a lot of things that we do. And that's the bottom line. The big problem is what we do with our bodies. One very important part of all these illnesses begins in the bowel. And that, as a group, is what we call inflammatory bowel disease. And it can be in different forms, from very simple, yet very important, because they tell us that we're doing something wrong with our bowel, and this is going to have serious consequences, to important diseases like ulcerative colitis, that produces ulcers and damage in the intestinal colon. And you know, those things, those sores that we produce inside our bowel, can bleed, produce a lot of mucus, produce a lot of inflammation. People are in constant pain. You can see it. I can see it probably because I'm a doctor. But you can see it. You talk to people, you find people, and you're talking to them, and you say, what is it? They never look good. They never look relaxed. They never look happy. They say, well, I have this bowel thing, I'm bloated, or I'm constipated, etc., etc. So all these problems are due to the lack of integrity and to the loss of cells in the intestinal mucosa. And there's a chain of problems that produce this, a long chain that begins probably before birth. If you have a mother that doesn't take care of herself, that doesn't eat well, that doesn't supplement everything, you're going to have chances of getting a weaker system. And then we'll see less and less natural birth. We see more and more cesarean section. And that natural birth is very important because it produces the quality of intestinal flora that our child is going to need. And a C-section doesn't provide it. And then we have less and less people that have breastfeeding. And that milk will produce a lot of nutrients for the bacteria of the bowel, not for the baby. Did you know that there are literally hundreds of nutritional substances in mother's milk that are not used by the baby? They're used by the intestinal bacteria. And then we create the diversity, the quality of bacteria that that baby will need throughout his life. And he should be in good shape unless he has a pediatrician that one day decides that the baby needs antibiotics. Needs antibiotics because it has a little bit of flu, because it has a little bit mucus, because it has something with the throat, because it has acne, because of you name it. In this time and age, we literally feed antibiotics to babies. I always ask this question. What are the chances of a baby being born today not to have antibiotics in the first year of life? And it's slim, believe me, because we use antibiotics for a lot of things. And when you have a child and your child develops a little bit of flu and feels sick, your grandmother would put you in your room and take care of you and give you chicken soup and give you teas, etc. Take care of you, in one word. But now we don't. I see mothers with a child and I say, well, he doesn't look well. No, he had some infections, but he's already taking medication. As if medication were going to change things. That's the long chain of things that are producing the problem. The other is food. We don't feed people, let alone children, the right way. And we have to learn about that. We have to learn that having a child, I have always said it, it's a responsibility. It's not a pleasure. We don't have a baby to hug and kiss and be good to him. We have a baby that we have the responsibility to look after that baby, to raise him well, to raise him strong, to raise him healthy. And for that, we have to learn. So I have these programs with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez from BioCare Hospital. I'm going to listen to some of them. But it is my responsibility to have a healthy child. Every time I see a mother suffering because the child is sick, I can see that in many cases that illness was brought upon by the caretaker. So be aware of that. Don't say nobody told me. Now I'm telling you. What happens at BioCare? I'm going to tell you what happens at BioCare and why we have been so successful with chronic inflammatory bowel disease. When you break a bone, you put a splint, don't you? You don't want that bone to move for some time in order to heal. When you have a health problem, sometimes you're put in a hospital or in your bedroom for several days because you need rest. You need to put that organ at rest. And then you say, but how am I going to put my bowel at rest, doctor? I have to eat. That's the BioCare approach. We put people in the hospital, we put a catheter, and we do intravenous feeding. And then you eat nothing, you drink nothing. But your body is going to have total nutritional satisfaction. And what's going to happen is that the bowel is going to take a break, finally take a break. We have seen very sick people that come in here virtually ready to be operated on, with intestinal bleeding, with acute pain. In 2-3 days, they look different. Once again, your face looks different when you don't have colonic disease. And they're so grateful, and they didn't take medication. All we did is give the body the chance to recover. How? To put the bowel to rest. We're not going to use you for some time. Heal. I'm going to feed the body in a different way. Not only that, but I'm going to be checking your intestinal flora. I'm going to see what you have and what you need. Because in many cases, through the use of antibiotics and faulty diets, yes, we have an intestinal flora, but we have a sample of everything we do not need, everything that can be damaging. So if I keep it healthy, if I give you the right amount and the right quality of intestinal flora cells, everything starts to improve. In many cases, I have seen people like that, they are given antibiotics. That's going to make things worse, because it's going to distort the intestinal flora even more. And you can read it. I'm not telling you. You can read the medical literature on how many times antibiotics fail in these type of cases. In these type of cases, what you need is rest. What you need is a hospital that's going to be working on detoxification, on intravenous nutritional support, on rest, on cleansing, on refiguring out the intestinal flora and bring it back. And it only takes 10 days, 2 weeks. You're going to be a different person. If you have any question in that area, give us a call. Send us an email. Ask a question. This can change your life, and it can change your life forever. You're going to be very happy you made that call, that you contacted us. Don't let it go. And if it's a mild problem, simple advices will change your life forever. See you next week.